Thanks.
Yeah.
The story about falling on one's face reminded me of this crazy story about my face. So I'm not sure. I studied abroad in Chile in 2005, and I came home. Came home for December and for the holidays and everything, and it was going to be my little interim before studying abroad again in Argentina. And I scheduled a physical during my time home. Just everything checked out and all that. And my mom, let me preface this, I grew up in suburban Boston, and my mom has a pretty thick Boston accent. So I woke up the morning of my physical, and she was like, "Nathan, tell them about your nose." And I was like, "Ma, what are you talking about?" And she started listing what I realized were symptoms, but I had sort of just thought were characteristics and traits. I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I don't really smell that well, and I can't really get around the strongest sense of taste." And I was like, "My nose is always stuffed." "You're right, Ma. I'll tell them about my nose." Yeah. So I got to the doctor, and I told him, I was like, "I don't know what's going on. There might be something in my nose." I don't know. So sure enough, they looked up my nose, and they found a tumor in my nose that was actually the entire left side of my sinuses. It was like from all the way up here to all the way down there. The fancy medical term is inverted papilloma. I don't know what it means. But they took a biopsy before all this, though, and they're like, "There's something going on." They took a biopsy and they tested it. But I told them, I was like, "I'm going to be studying abroad, and my flight's in 3 weeks. I still want to go to Argentina. Can I go?" So they called a week later, and they're like, "Yeah, you can go study abroad. Don't worry about it." So kind of put it out of my mind, and I flew to Buenos Aires. And 2 days after that, I got a phone call from my parents that they had gotten a call from the doctor and that I needed to fly home for the tumor. They reanalyzed the biopsy, and there was something going on. So I ended up getting the date for the appointment. It was March 15th, the odds for March. And I borrowed a couple $1,000 from my parents, and I spent a couple weeks traveling around South America, which was awesome, and I did everything I could to put this potentially cancerous tumor situation out of my mind. I was like, I'm just going to travel. So I started in Buenos Aires, and I ended up taking a 36-hour bus ride from Buenos Aires all the way to the tip. And I got on the bus for the beginning of this 3-week adventure. I was really excited. And I knew this was going to be a long bus ride. And I turned to my bus partner, and I was like, "Hey," started trying to chat. And she wasn't interested. And I was like, "Oh," I had this little magnetic chess set. I was like, "Oh, you play magnetic chess?" No interest. I was like, "Oh, do you want to learn?" No interest. So it was kind of a really quiet, a lot of reading for 36 hours. Got to the southern tip of Argentina, and then I almost immediately found out that I could take a 3-hour flight instead for less money. So, but it was great. This whole 3-week travel experience. Ended up hiking with some guys for 5 days in Chile and Torres del Paine, and one of the guys, and I just met these people. Basically, I realized I could do this 5-day hike around Torres del Paine, and started hiking with some folks. One of them ended up climbing Everest later that year, and another one was this really interesting guy in the Israeli army. And then I ended up taking a 5-day fjord trip, boat trip up through the Chilean fjords to cap it all off, and it was great. So I did the best that I could to put the tumor situation out of my mind. And then I flew home, though, and I had an appointment with the doctor. The doctor ended up being this guy who's kind of like a robot. Every time I saw him, we'd have the same exact conversation. He'd ask me how school was, and I'd tell him school was fine. He'd ask me what I was studying, and I'd tell him I was studying Spanish. And then he'd get right down to business. So it was never changed every single time. He actually invented the surgery that I had. He was this Harvard doctor. He was a professor there as well, and he had this swanky office. But the thing that stuck out was right before the surgery, which was in June. They wheel me into the emergency room. He looks down at me. He's in his scrubs. I've never seen him in scrubs before, and he goes, "So, we're gonna do some drilling, huh?" I was like, "Great, thanks. I didn't need to know that right before we got here. Awesome." There were 2 options. They could have, if it went well, he told me, they would just be able to go up into my nose, through the nostril, and kind of drill everything out. I don't even know. And if it had gone poorly, they would have had to do a lot of, I don't even know, they would have had to actually do incisions and everything. So, but I had the surgery. I had a follow-up surgery with him. Everything went fine, and I had these follow-up appointments with him for a couple years afterwards. And I would go into Boston. It was like this routine. I'd go into Boston and I'd go up to his office and we'd have the same conversation all over again. He'd be like, "Oh, how you doing? That's cool." And then he'd take this. He had this like, it was like this little metal tube. It was like this long thing that he would use to look up my nose. He'd like spray something on it, and it was incredible. I was like, "Wow, I didn't know my face had that much space in it. Like the thing would just like disappear into your face, and like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening." It's like a super weird sensation. He'd just look around in there and then take it out. He'd be like, "All right, you're good to go." So this was like the routine. I'd come home from school, or I kept scheduling these appointments for years afterwards. I'd come home and I'd schedule an appointment, and I'd go in and we'd have the same conversation, and he'd like take this thing out and look at my nose. And at first it was preventative, or like some sort of follow-up, you know. I was like, all right, this is good. Except there was this one appointment towards the end where I walked into his office and he seemed confused. He was like, "What's going on? Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And I was like, yeah, everything's fine. You know, I just thought, I don't know, I thought you wanted to look up my nose again. So he was like, okay, and he scratched his head, and I could tell he was kind of as confused as I was, as to I was like, I thought this was normal. So he goes, "Hey, can I actually," he goes, "All right, actually, can I, would you mind if I took some pictures?" And I didn't really know what this was going to mean, but I was like, sure, you have a good reputation, you're a doctor, like, whatever, sure, go for it. So he takes out a camera, an SLR, like a fancy camera with the lens that comes up and everything. And he has an attachment to attach his nose probe to the camera. And the schnozzdoc, as I called him, not to his face, but in my mind, then he takes it and attaches it. He's got one hand on my face. He's got the other hand, and he goes in with the camera, and he starts snapping away in there. He's just clicking away inside my face. I think he was trying to justify the cost of the appointment. Like, oh, like, we did this procedure this time, now insurance will pay for it. But he ended up taking the camera out, and I'll never forget, he looked up at me afterwards, and he looked me in the eyes, and he goes, "You're cured." And I've never had a doctor say that since. I don't know if I was again, so yeah, that's the story.